9:30 to 11 a.m. And if there are any questions by the public, they can ask at the end of the meeting. And we are going to introduce our NRC folks. My name is again V. Srinivas. I'm PM for North Anna.
Amber Patel, Technical Reviewer.
Eric Osterly, Acting Chief of the Reactor Systems Branch, NRC.
Kent Wood, Technical Reviewer.
Karen Cotton, sorry.
Mike Markley, Chief Plant Licensing Branch, 2-1 in Doral.
With this, Diane, you can go with Dominion contacts.
Okay, this is Diane Aiken, Corporate Licensing.
Bob Hall, Core Design. Craig Sly, Corporate Licensing. Tom Brookmeyer, Nuclear Fuel. David Livingston, Core Design. Casey Kennett, Core Design. Mike Lico, Nuclear Fuel Projects. Tom Sliker, Core Design.
That's everybody here.
And Dale Lancaster, consultant for Dominion.
Okay. Is there anybody calling in from the public side?
Mute off.
Richmond, Virginia.
Hi, Erica. Thank you. Is there any other members of the public? Thank you. Any other?
Mute on.
Okay, I gave another number for NEI. Is NEI called in? Okay, thank you. With this, we are going to start the meeting. Dominion, Diane, you can start.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Hall, sir.
Okay, I'm just going to walk through the PowerPoint that was sent out first. So this is for North Anna Power Station. Will involve new fuel storage racks and spent fuel pool rack criticality analysis for a proposed license amendment request. Page 2. Our agenda today is to, just as a review, to talk about the current North Anna Power Station spent fuel pool configuration. We'll talk about the proposed changes as part of the LAR. Talk about our analysis goals that will be part of that LAR. We will introduce some details of the analysis by means of what we call the criticality analysis checklist. That's a separate document that was sent out a couple of weeks ago to NRC staff, and that's available as well. We'll talk about that, and that'll be our opportunity to kind of dig into some of the next level down details of what can be expected to be found in that analysis. We'll have a brief discussion of conservatism, overarching conservatism, and then we'll present our conclusions and our proposed timeline. Slide 3. The current North Anna spent fuel pool configuration, there's one rack cell design, so all the racks are the same type. They are licensed to 4.6 weight percent U-235 maximum enrichment, total of 1,737 cells in the pool. The design of the racks is flux trap style with Boraflex neutron absorber. Pitch is 10.56 inches. There is presently no credit for Boraflex. There is credit for soluble boron and for burnup. There's 2 regions in the pool. Region 1 features 4 out of 4 storage, so there's no geometry limitations there, with 1 burnup curve. And then Region 2 is a 5x5 region that has 2 levels of reactivity of fuel in it. An empty cell in the center, high reactivity cells surrounding the faces of that empty cell, and then the rest of the space is filled by low reactivity fuel. So the intent there is that's where fresh fuel would be stored. I'll show a picture of that on the next page. There's a cell blocker in the center and 1 burn-up curve. So a figure of that on page 4, or slide 4. That's a illustration of what Region 2 would look like. The center is blocked. The high reactivity fuel is face neighbored to the block cell, and then the low reactivity fuel fills the rest of the 5x5. So that's the present configuration. Our proposed changes are on slide 5. We would like to increase the enrichment limit to 5 weight percent U-235, primarily to enhance core design flexibility. By doing so, we also intend to simplify the region configuration. So we would go away from the 5x5, and I'll get at those in a second. Oh, there they are, actually. Region 1 would be a simple 2 out of 4 checkerboard, empty cells and fresh fuel, with no burn-up requirement in Region 1. Region 2 would be, as it is now, 4 out of 4 storage, with 1 burn-up curve for low decay time. That's a peak reactivity decay time, and then 1 burn-up curve for 3-year decay time. As is presently the situation, there would be no installed neutron absorber credit.
Bob?
Yes.
This is Kentwood. These regions, would they be permanently designated in the spent fuel pool, or would they be changing? Or would they be subject to change over, depending on how much storage you needed of which type?
The way we're analyzing it, Kent, is that they could float with restrictions. The restrictions would be, for example, the corners have to terminate. It has to terminate in the corners with empty cells, for example. There has to be at least 2 rows of Region 2 between each Region 1 block to isolate them from each other, for example. So in other words, the analysis will be performed with the idea that these regions could be floating regions. The probability is that we're going to set them and forget them. All right, on slide 6, I guess we're on now, yes? Yep. All right, slide 6. The analysis goals, among others, are to incorporate recent criticality issues and improvements. The vintage of the analysis that's in place now is around year 2000, and there have been a number of issues raised about criticality analysis and how it's performed, and so we would incorporate all of those issues. We would like to increase identified margin, and we would perform this analysis consistent with what we've presented in the criticality analysis checklist, which we hope will clarify up front, all of the elements and items that would be covered in the analysis. So it should be a more straightforward understanding going in as to, what we're proposing and what you can expect to see.
So, Bob, this is Kent. Do you want to walk through that checklist now or later?
Tell you what, we got 2 quick slides or 3 quick slides left, and then we'll get into it.
Okay.
There's not a lot left in the slides, but so the checklist, since we're talking about it, that's on slide 7. The idea of the checklist is twofold. It's going to follow the expected criticality analysis report format. So in the checklist, you'll see section numbers, and this is pretty much how you could expect the report to be written. It's almost like an index for the criticality analysis report. It'll follow that format. It includes placeholders for the scope, methods, and details.
Valley Pears Inc.
Not
There
the
you go.
deepest of detail levels, but the major levels of the what's in here sort of things in an analysis. Shaded bars in the checklist will indicate the major sections. There's indentations that indicates a subtopic or an element within a topic or a group of topics. There is indication of yes, no, whether something's included. And, there could be a question of, hey, are you guys doing? And if we left it out of the checklist, it would be an open question. So we decided we'll put those items in the checklist and answer them no. So, for example, if the question was, are you including any credit for Boraflex? The answer would be no. So it'll show up in the checklist as a no. just try to make everything as clear as possible. On slide 8, in terms of conservatism, we plan to come in with NRC set-aside administrative margin of 1% delta K. That would be yours to use for whatever issues you may find, or use it or not use it. We also intend to identify additional retained margin for Dominion that would allow for any issues that might come up later, future minor design changes or methodology issues that are identified in the future. Final slide is a conclusion and a timeline. Again, the conclusion is we intend to present a North Anna spent fuel pool and new fuel rack criticality analysis license amendment request that will seek to increase maximum fuel enrichment. It will simplify storage configurations, and it will increase identified margin to the K-effective limits. The major milestones, our expectation is to submit in September of this year. We would be targeting receiving an SER in September of 2018, and then thereafter shuffle fuel and implement the new tech specs. Probably fourth quarter of 18, according to this proposed timeline. So I'll just stop there and ask if you have any general questions before we jump into the checklist. Because when we get into the checklist, we'll start getting into the weeds. That's the fun part. But anybody have any general questions first?
Yeah, this is Eric Osterly from the staff. Just a general observation. This checklist that you provided, this is the first time that we've seen it. It was not provided to us previously. So your coordination there, I think something happened, but this is the first time we got it. Well, right, from them. Yeah. Not NEI. Oh, from NEI.
This is Mike Markley. My question is on the 2-year review. I mean, Kent, you guys, I don't know what you have on your plate, but we try to do things in a year. I know it's not happened very historically well with the criticality reviews, but if you can surface as many bumps in the road here for them to consider in the submittal, I'd rather have a later submittal that's done more timely on our end.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. This is kind of what, is going through the checklist. There's a couple things I noted. We're hopefully in the process of getting Millstone Unit 2 out. There were hopefully some lessons learned from that they can incorporate that and do those things ahead of time before they submit it. Because they're using a similar methodology here for using the Triton depletion, which was a big stumbling block for us on the Millstone review. And hopefully there's lessons learned that they can do ahead of time when they submit that we don't have to then ask the same questions and do that work later. If we can get that up front, then it'll be much smoother review.
Yeah, so this is Eric Osterly from the staff. It's a good question, Mike, and just to put this review into context of other activities. There is also an effort going on with developing guidance for these types of reviews. And so we're currently in the process of looking at NEI 12-16, which provides generic industry guidance for performing these types of activities. And so we're in the midst of that review as well. And we won't be done by the time Dominion plans to submit this LAR for our review.
So are you going to follow that guidance?
We will.
This is Bob Hall. I'm on the NEI 1216 team that's trying to help put that together. Right. And so what we've tried to do with the checklist is actually what today would consider a test drive of this checklist. So it's draft version 1 of the NEI 1216 checklist. So it's almost, we're doing double duty here. You're seeing some things from us just because of timing that you're also going to see in NEI 1216, I expect. So we're doing some things kind of concurrently here. However, the checklist is on our part an effort to coordinate with 1216 and say the things that are in 1216 are the things that show up in our checklist, and we're trying to cover all of those items proactively up front.
Okay, so for the purpose of our review here, you're not dependent on the industry guidance. You're doing it as a plant-specific review and just submitting it yourself, correct?
Correct.
Okay, makes it a lot easier for us, even with the overlap.
All right. If there's no other questions of a general nature, we can, I'll just turn it over to you, Kent, for what questions you might have about items you've seen in the checklist.
Okay. I got through the checklist. I was reviewing it again this morning before the meeting. It's like I say, some of it looks pretty standard, like we're copying out of NEI 1216 and stuff that's been going on before. But as you know, the problem can get the devil's in the details with a lot of this stuff, which is some of the things we need to identify here. Just going through the checklist, starting on page 1 of 7 here, and Amrit's also here as well. Give me a backup. So if he has any comments, I ask him to chime in as well. But I'd like to go through it from starting on the first page. The only thing I've got there on the first page here is this storage rack description. Is the idea of schematics, or are you planning on providing schematics or not? I don't see them listed here, but they were in NEI did send us the draft checklist last week, and they did include schematics on their list.
Okay. When you say schematics, let's be real clear. You want what we've typically provided is sort of a Kino 3D representation. Are you looking for actual rack drawings?
No, I'm not looking for actual rack drawings. We don't need the actual rack drawings to model layout, basically. But we do need like the schematic of the cell tolerances. Not the entire drawing, but if you can give us the dimensions and the Kino schematic, we can probably put it together from that.
Yes. In fact, we've got in one of our documents in the calculations we've been working on it's not a rack drawing itself, but it's a representation of a rack drawing with all of the tolerances and dimensions represented on that. So I think that's probably what you're looking for.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not looking for the whole drawing. I'm not looking for something I could build one from, but something that I could model it in Kino ourselves if we want.
Right. Yeah, that is we understood that to be the intent, to provide sufficient information that you could build your own models from.
Right. That's the reason why I'm asking. So, okay.
I'll add that as a bullet item under 3.0.
Okay.
The first page I just had a quick, I was going through the checklist and specifically for the first page, and everything made sense except one thing wasn't intuitive. Under overview, under section 5, overview of the method of analysis. Okay. Under new fuel rack analysis description, the line item that says storage geometries, it says included, it says no. So I was wondering, what's really meant by that? So you wouldn't talk? Does that just mean you're not going to talk about it, or?
Well, that's probably I think the plural is the issue there, right? There's only one
single region.
Yeah.
But I guess
I'll clarify that one. We will describe what the storage rack looks like.
Okay, yeah, it just looked like you were not going to do that, so I thought that was interesting.
I agree. That's a confusing one. We'll clarify that one.
Okay.
Okay, so now that's a comment now we'll keep for the NEI guidance document. Maybe we should say storage geometry and then put in parentheses IES. So that, it's whether you got one or more.
Right, so we'll put yes, we'll describe them. Since it's an overview, we'll describe them, but we'll indicate in the explanation that there's one or two or three regions or types, if anybody has that. I mean, we just have a single vault with one type of cell, so.
Were you on 2?
No, so it's
Still going? You still talking on 1?
Well, I was looking here, is that, okay, so I think that's all we have on 1, page 1.
A question on 2.
Yeah, okay.
On about the decay time credit line item,
Yes.
it says that you included that on a burn-up curve, but, did you use the same, what code would you use to do that, or method to?
That would be done directly in Triton. In the Triton model, one of the inputs is a downtime.
Yeah.
Essentially a decay time. So for the peak reactivity, that's in the range of 4 to 8 days, and for the 3-year curve, we would just put 3 years decay time there. So we would recalculate the isotopics inside Triton at 3 years.
I think that would be a good note for your justification/explanation to say what code you're using, because we've seen other instances where people have used different codes, and it wasn't necessarily always straightforward that was the case, so.
Okay.
But that's just a note maybe for the future, not necessarily here.
Well, maybe we need to put this in, this is comment for the NEI stuff, this decay code. Under 6. Okay.
This is Chris Cummins from NEI. I am on the phone. I came in about 5 minutes late, so I am just listening now as an observer.
Okay.
All right, Chris.
How's it going?
All right.
Good, thanks.
I assume for section 6 cross sections and computer codes and validation, you're going to be doing something similar, the same thing you did for Millstone?
Right. It refers to Appendix Alpha.
Yeah.
So there's some more description at the end of this checklist about Appendix Alpha and what's in there. That's on page 7. Talks about the new Reg 6698 method.
Another thing I just noted, just for note, is on the things like when you talk about convergence checks and you talk about histories and source and all this stuff. I don't know if there's probably maybe not room, but it would be useful to have up front there what you used. For example, number of skip, number of generations, number of particles per generation for each of those things, so we can get a good indication of kind of where your starting point is. Because it's great. It's helpful to know that you looked at source, history, and trends, but it doesn't really tell us what was done or give us an indication of the quality of your modeling. But
right, understand. So part of test driving the checklist is seeing how much detail you would want to go into at the checklist level. To get down into the, do we want to get to that level, or is the checklist more of an opportunity for discussion, like we're having?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Bob, the idea is the checklist is when we got to make sure we hit all the high topics. We don't necessarily get all the gory details of what's going to be done on the checklist.
I was just thinking that one. It just seemed like low-hanging fruit. That's all. So it's an easy one. A 3-comma list. Skipped, active, particles per generation.
Well, I said we'll have those discussions when we get into the specifics about NEI 1216. We start parsing the words that.
But it's also specific. It's specifically important for this review because they use T5, the T5 DEPL sequence, which is a Monte Carlo transport solver. So then it becomes even more important, right? So.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's what I alluded to before. Is that we'd asked, they used this for Millstone, and we had several questions that took a while to answer. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to have those same questions again, Bob. So, well, I guess what I was alluding to earlier is if you answer those up front, that's what's going to make this go smoother.
Okay, so when we get to, I would suggest when we get to section 8, let's dig into that. So,
I mean, that's where I was going to bring it up because that's a different section, but yeah.
Okay, so
Just a side note, there also, this same depletion technique was also used for Indian Point.
Okay, thank you.
so I guess the feedback I would be interested in for the NEI checklist and for this one is, do we want to add another level of detail there? Like you say about number per generation, number skipped, and that sort of thing.
I would say it's just a thought. I mean, I'm not trying to...
Yeah, I want to keep this discussion focused on the North Anna review.
Okay. Just to flesh out that conversation, what we are intending to say about convergence checks is that we did them. Because that was an issue, I think, in our discussions between NEI and NRC, was that sometimes the analysis would come in and it wouldn't really indicate how you determined you were converged, or didn't have the information, like you say, about how many generations or how many skipped or how did you know you were converged. So part of the reason we put it in the checklist and say yes is we're going to talk about those things.
I see.
Yeah, convergence is the key, and then how you ensure you were converged, I think, is what needs to be in the details, and the details of addressing that should probably be in the bulk of the NEI 1216 guidance document, as well as your discussion in your submittal.
So we'll just take an action point from this discussion that we need to make sure we have a clear discussion of how we ascertain that we're converged, and provide sufficient information that you're satisfied about how we set those models up.
Okay, the other thing I see on this page is, down a little bit forward, is this idea of using the New Reg CR 7109. Now, what was our issue before? Was that 7109 or 7108 that you guys were using?
Well, 7109 was, we came in initially with a sort of our own, let me pull the words back up. It was the direct difference. We came in with an analysis of the direct difference results from either 7108 or 7109, and there were a number of questions directed at that as to the consistency of the codes used and the versions of the codes used and so forth. And so that was to try to get at the 5% reactivity uncertainty for burnup, for burnup worth.
Which shows up 4 lines above the 7109 issue.
Right, and so we backed away from that in the RAIs and said that's a lot of work to do to directly answer those questions, because there were statistical questions there were issues of code versions and so forth. And so we opted rather to use the ISG 2010-01 5% burnup worth.
Okay, well, I also recall that there was you guys were making some modifications to the described methodology in the report.
Yeah, that's not, that was related to developing our own 5%. We are no longer doing that. We're going with the straight up 5% from your ISG now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't gone back and pulled up all the details from the Millstone review. Okay. Now these are kind of like the first several sections here, they're kind of overview sections, and now we're section 7, we're really starting into the meat.
Correct. You've got descriptions and methodology and criteria up front. So it's verbiage for the most part and tables of input data, and then you get to the actual analysis results starting in section 7.
Okay. It's, and here is just your answer to your checklist would be like the one that Hammered